In this video, we're going to create an X-bar chart. If you remember, in our taxonomy of control charts, the X-bar chart falls under the variable or measurement data, the continuous variables column. And this X-bar chart you create when you have a subgroup that has more than one observation. And that way we can use that information to our advantage by accounting for the sample variations that we have. So this is the lab time that we had for the turnaround time to go to the emergency department using a sample of 3 tests for each day for 23 consecutive work days. So here's day 1. We had 3 different sample times or observation times of the turnaround time. So the first thing that we want to do is calculate out the mean for the day. And how do we do that? Just simple average function. We also want to calculate out the standard deviation, and we can use the sample standard deviation formula because that's what we're dealing with, is sample data. So we have the X-bar, or the mean for the day, is 78 minutes with a standard deviation of 7 minutes. Now we need to do that for each day, so we can just copy all of that for the entire row of data, or all 23 days. The next step is to calculate out the average of the averages, or sometimes referred to as the grand mean. It's also called X-bar, X-bar bar. So how do we calculate that? You could take the average of the averages, but we have the raw data, so ideally we want to take all of the sample observations and get the grand mean of all of the observations. So you can see I've highlighted or selected all of that data into my average calculation, my average function, and we get 83.27536 and so on. Now the S-bar is the global standard deviation. How do we calculate that? Well, you can probably figure that we're going to do the same thing as we did for the grand mean. We select all of our observation data and put that into our function for the standard deviation, the sample standard deviation, and we get our S-bar, which is 16.0, or that's our global standard deviation. Next, we take that S-bar and we divide it by the square root of n. In this case, we have 3 observations per day, so our square root, or our n, is 3. Then we take 3 times our sigma, so our sigma is 9.244969, and we just multiply that times 3. Now if you wanted to, you could also do a 2 sigma simply by multiplying our sigma times 2. Now that you have the sigma, how do you suppose we calculate the upper control limit and the lower control limit? Well, we have our mean for the entire set of data, our grand mean. So we take our grand mean, which is our center point, and for the upper control limit, we simply add the 3 sigma value. For the lower control limit, we take our X-bar bar and we subtract the 3 sigma value. So we get as an upper control limit 111 and change, and for our lower control limit it's 55.5 and change. Now that we've done our calculations, we can create our table that we'll use to create the chart. So I have listed here the values that we're going to need: the X bar, the X bar bar, the upper control limit, and the lower control limit values. Well, the X bar is going to be the daily X bar values that we calculated out earlier on. So we can hit Control C to copy all of those observations for the day. But when we paste them in, if we paste them in directly, it's going to copy the formulas, and the formulas are actually referencing these cells up here, which will give us the wrong information. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to right-click, paste special, and we're going to paste the values in, just the values. Now we have all these data. We'll do a quick double check to make sure that they copied and they line up properly and we didn't accidentally shift over to the left or to the right. For the X bar bar, we have that value. We can do a cell reference for the X bar bar, but the X bar bar doesn't change per day because it's the grand mean. It's the average of the averages, or the average of all of our observations. So we hit F4 to make it a fixed cell reference. The upper control limit in this particular case likewise does not change. So we'll take the upper control limit, we'll do a cell reference, and we hit F4. Could we have just typed in 111.0103? Yes, we could have done that as well. For the lower control limit, again, we'll do an F4 to make it a fixed cell reference. Double check to make sure that the dollar signs are on the variables or the cell references to make sure they're fixed. Then we can go in and copy all those for all days. So the only thing that changes from day to day from our chart data is the actual X bar. Now that we have this data, we can go in and select the entire table. So we select all of the data in the table, we go insert, click insert, and we could do this off of a line chart. Unfortunately, none of the Excel charts make it nice and clean and easy, but the scatter plots tend to work well. So if you take the scatter plot, let me see if I can get that to show up again. The scatter plot with straight lines and markers, click on that and we get our chart, which doesn't look anything like what we had in the PowerPoint presentation. Let's move it down here where we can work with it a little bit. So again, with Excel, we have to do some tweaking to make it look like what we want it to look like. So we'll start off by right-clicking on our upper control limit and hit the Format Data Series. So I right-clicked, hit Format Data Series, and we have this dialog box. First thing we're going to do is hit the marker options and hit none, because we don't need any markers for the data points because we know they're all the same anyway. We're going to change our line color, just to be consistent with the slides, to yellow on the top for the upper control limit, in other words. We'll change the line style, just make it to 1.5 points. That's over in the line style. We can just click without closing our Format Data Series. We can just click on the next set of data that we want to work with. And this is our X bar bar, as you can see. We're going to go ahead and take our X bar bar and again take off our markers. We don't need the data points marked out. We're going to go ahead and take our line color, and our line color for the X bar bar was purple. Now you don't really have the purple here. I have it here because I was running through the colors before when I was practicing. But you can go ahead and, let me go back and do that again. You can go ahead and hit more colors and you'll get either this or this showing up, and you can use either one to try to pick your color. So we're going to pick a pinkish color in our standard color chart. Hit OK. Go down to line style, the next selection below, and decrease it to 1.5 point line. And that looks about like we're done with the upper control limit. Now we go down to the lower control limit. Again, we get rid of the markers. We're going to pick a line color of a kind of a bluish green, one of these colors here. Again, we'll click more colors in case you don't have that, and we'll select a nice neon looking light blue color. Why do I want that? Well, you'll see in a minute when we change the background. Now let's change our data set values, the XBAR values. Here we do want the markers, but let's make them just a little bit smaller, maybe about a 4. The marker fill now, we're going to change the color of our line, so let's go ahead and change the color of our fill while we're at it. We're going to take a nice dark blue. We're going to take our line color, make that the same color as our marker, a nice dark blue, and the line style, we'll drop that down to about 1.5 points as well. It's starting to come together. Now let's just click on the plot area, which is just this general area here. Click on some white space. Again, we didn't close our format area, plot area, or format data area. We can keep this open while we're working through everything. So this, we're going to take a nice solid color, maybe not the dark blue, but we'll pick a nice gray that'll give us some contrast to see everything. Maybe a little darker. Maybe darker still. One notch bet. Now if you click your horizontal lines that show up from the original chart design, you'll notice that we have little circles on either end. That indicates that we've got the data selected, or the lines selected. We're going to go ahead and change the color of the solid lines, and we'll make them a nice dark gray. They already look thin enough, so I think we can leave that where we are. Now if you remember on our charts in the PowerPoint presentation, it was only showing mainly the data we were working with, our XBAR values. So if you look at our chart here, it starts off, the values start off at the origin. The X value is 0 and the Y value is 0. Well, we can click on our data on the vertical and we can change that when we clicked on that. Now if you've happened to hit close on at any point here, you can just right click on the data and hit Format Access. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the lower limit of our data, or of our plot area, to, we don't want to go higher than our lower control limit, so we'll just pick 50. And that shows our data much more clearly. But still, we're missing something here. How about some axes labels and a title for our chart? So how do we do that? Well, just click on the actual frame of the chart, go up to the top where we have layout listed, and we can start adding things. Let's add a chart title. We don't want to set overlay, we'll just do it above. Our legend, let's put it on the bottom so that it gives us our data plot area spread out a little bit better. And now for our primary horizontal axis, we'll put the title in there. And then for the vertical, we have 3 different options. Well, we're going to do the rotated title, so it takes up very little space. And we can start adding things in now. So on the vertical, or our y-axis, we're talking about, what are we looking at? These are our minutes, and that goes back to our that just goes to show you too, you can also double click on it and it'll pop up the format dialog box, but I don't want to format, I just want to type. As I was saying, the minutes refers back to our original raw data, which was the observations of 3 different observations per day of the minutes it took for the turnaround time. So now we have our horizontal axis, our vertical axis, and now we'll put our title in. And this was the XBAR chart for CBC turnaround time. And these are just a few of the tweaks that you could do. You can go further if you want to. You can maybe move this label, the legend up a little bit, since our x-axis isn't so large. You can stretch this out a little bit more if it would help you to understand the data a little bit better. So you can adjust some of these things. There's a little bit of flexibility here, but in general we have our X bar chart here.